Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. Last week we had some good responses to our episodes, some positive feedback. Like I said, we're going to try to do these weekly, so if you enjoyed it, remember to please try to like and subscribe on YouTube so you get all those new episodes and you can hear everything, and we'll go from there. We're really excited this week to have on Junior College Hall of Fame coach Joe Kersting. I was looking through, doing my homework on this, and obviously I knew some of this stuff, but Coach Kersting's had stops at U of A, NAU, Arizona Christian, most notably, of course, at Glendale Community College, where he amassed a 115-43 record as a head coach. With his role as an offensive coordinator as well, was involved in 3 national championship teams at Glendale Community College, 14 conference titles, 15 bowl games, an astounding 10-time conference coach of the year, and was inducted into the National Junior College Hall of Fame in 2006, I believe. Coach Kersting is a guy that I was, my first notes actually, from the first coaching clinic I ever went to in the year 2000 are on Coach Kersting's fly sweep offense. And I talked about a little bit. I always find this book to be a great reading. I always try to look through it at the start of the season, find out what we can do to help our program advance and do the things necessary to build a championship team, because I do think it's a process you almost start over on a yearly basis. So we're excited to have him. Went on to Deer Valley High School, where in his 2 years there, his second season, they were 10-2, defeated Centennial in the regular season with legendary coach Richard Taylor, and then lost a heartbreaker to them in the state quarterfinals. But just an amazing job at every stop. Was our offensive coordinator for 3 seasons at Prescott. Record-breaking type of offenses we had, and we're ecstatic to have him on the program. So thank you so much for joining us, Coach.
To it. Always love talking ball.
All right, well, before we get into the topic at hand, I figured it would be remiss of us not to go back and maybe talk a little bit of the college football playoffs. Certainly some exciting CFP action this weekend. It's quite a if you're a football junkie, it's been quite a weekend with the wild card games and the college football playoff Thursday and Friday. Really enjoyed watching Penn State. Thought they did a nice job. I know I'm going to butcher his name, but Andy Kotelnicki came over from Kansas. Their offensive coordinator do such a nice job with the stretch play. Obviously, I know there's going to be some armchair quarterbacks questioning some of the results at the end of the game with the pick and maybe going to overtime, but certainly that's not my place to do that. But from a schematic point, I really enjoyed watching some of the things they did. Obviously, Marcus Freeman in that defense with Al Golden, who a lot of people remember from the University of Miami. He was the head coach, also a player at Penn State, so there was some interesting backstory in that game. Watching what they've done defensively and offensively under Marcus Freeman has been really, really exciting. I know a lot of Irish fans are extremely excited and happy, and maybe getting a little bit of pleasure in the fact that Brian Kelly, it would appear, maybe left to go to LSU because he didn't think it was possible to get to the national championship in the current setting with Notre Dame, and then having them knock off SEC power Georgia and a Big Ten power on their way to the championship game is really, really quite impressive. So that was an exciting game. I know Coach Brusso's going to have some input on that, a big Notre Dame fan, but Texas, Ohio State, I thought was equally exciting. Always enjoy watching, if you're an offensive guy, which I like to think I maybe am. Fun game when you're watching Steve Sarkisian's offense and Chip Kelly's offense. Some schematic observations I made from that one. Texas had a couple big plays on the tight end leak that has become so popular of late. 2 touchdowns in the high red zone on the rail route, which I thought was pretty exciting there. Also, something that Texas does so well that you'll see a little bit on the Twitterverse there is the Sark screen. They do a really creative job with their screen game and things of that nature. Ohio State, Chip Kelly, really enjoyed watching them as a gap scheme guy. Enjoyed watching them bust out the quarterback power on a critical 4th and 3 from an unbalanced tray look, it looked like to me. Also interesting, you don't see a lot of college teams run G in the middle part of the field, but you do seem to get it, what I believe a lot of wing T guys would call the down scheme, where you get tight end tackled down, play side guard kick, but you do see a lot of teams break that out on the goal line. Saw Ohio State able to do that as well, which I thought was kind of fun. Jim Knowles, their defensive coordinator, they really do a really outstanding job, I think, from a defensive perspective. Came over from Oklahoma State a few years ago. Enjoy watching some of their stuff. Very creative in how they create pressures. Obviously, that huge defensive stand and sack, fumble, scoop, and score at the end of the game is quite impressive, no question. Enjoyed watching also South Point Catholic's Latham Ransom, Ohio State defender. I think prep football in Arizona has gotten so good, so it's really fun to see those guys out there and be successful at the highest levels in college football. So turn it over to Coach Kersting first, our guest. Some observations you may have had from the very exciting semifinal weekend of college football.
Well, my observation about Notre Dame is that they have built such a fantastic culture. You can see within every aspect of their team that they are playing for each other. They're playing with tremendous energy and effort. And no matter what the circumstance of the game, they seem to be composed and ready to go. I was really impressed with that. My one observation, and this goes back to my philosophy as an offensive coach, is you better make the tough run go. And if you can't make the tough run go in the crucial times, you're probably going to lose the game. And you got first and goal at the 1 yard line, you better be able to put the ball in the end zone. And Ohio State coming up with that goal line stand. I had neither team was I interested in, winning one way or the other. But when I saw Texas not be able to just line up and smash it at you a few times and get in the end zone, I knew they were in trouble. And then obviously the huge play comes up and the game's over.
Interesting, because Texas had run the ball so well throughout most of the year, and then for whatever reason they struggled a bit against ASU. Definitely against Clemson, they ran the ball pretty well, but the last two ball games, and obviously those defensive schemes had a lot to do with that. I know you, I believe, worked with ASU DC Brian Ward. I thought ASU had a great plan and did some really nice things on that. But two exciting games. Coach Brusso, your thoughts?
I just thought it was, especially the Notre Dame game, was just what everyone loves about college football, just the tradition, the pageantry, the storylines, and then just the back and forth, both teams throwing haymakers down to the wire. Someone with a little skin in the game with Notre Dame, when they don't score and they're on the plus 40 and then they have to punt it away after a sack on third down, it can't happen. There you start to get really nervous just because momentum can slip away so quickly. And they turn around and get a clutch interception and things just kind of fall their way. But it's just why you love college football. The stakes are the highest, and first year obviously in the 12-team playoff, so I suppose it's even more so. But it was just really fun to watch, and I got to watch most of it at a wrestling tournament, which was nice. It was a first for me. I've not watched football there, but it was interesting. But I enjoyed both those games, and the thing I love about watching football at the higher levels is just there's certain coaches where you just listen to them and you want to run through a wall for them. And Marcus Freeman is one of those guys, and I've always been a big fan of his, and just the way he leads those players in that team, and that viral clip of him against A&M earlier in the year. That stuff just gets me going, and it just fires you up. I don't know how you couldn't want to play for somebody like that.
Absolutely, no question about it. I know sometimes for me it's very difficult to differentiate my coaching hat and my fan hat when I'm watching Sun Devil games. In fact, now that the season's over, I've gone back and tried to analyze some of the things they're doing offensively and defensively, and we're hoping to dive into that in some future episodes of the show. But really exciting college football playoff, and it's really amazing when you think about it that this, obviously people are going to disagree with this, but possibly the first true national champion that's ever been at the highest levels of college football, with the way the tournament has gone this year. And I know there's been some argument. I find that interesting too. Everybody was in a little bit of a tizzy on whether or not the other teams should get the byes necessarily for winning their conference championship. And I find that really interesting. The NFL has done that for years and years and years, and maybe haven't heard quite as much about it there. the complaint wise. I mean, if you look at Minnesota, they're tomorrow playing in with the crazy, unfortunate circumstances, tragic circumstances in LA, are playing that game against the Rams in Glendale. But the Rams are supposed to be the home game on that, and the Vikings are 14-3. So I think it's interesting that you've heard so much about that at the college game, but maybe not from the professional game. So interesting food for thought there.
Because many of those major colleges think there's only two leagues, the Big Ten and the SEC. And if you're not in one of those two, then you're not really elite. So I think that's the bias that is playing into that outcome of the buys. So I think they'll tweak it, and I think it'll get better as the years go on.
Well, and it's not like the college kids or programs aren't accustomed to buys because they get more. Like NFL, you only get one, where college you get multiple throughout the year. So you should be primed, and it's not unfamiliar territory for any of those guys. So it could just be the way the cards fell, and fortunately, people kind of overreact, especially when those higher leagues, as you put it, are involved.
Well, we're going to dive into the topic now, which is program building, and we're very excited to have Coach Kersting talk about this. Obviously, as we've said, we're planning on having different guests every week, and we're going to really dive deep into a topic. I'm sure we'll have Coach Kersting on a future episode as we talk about different topics, but we're going to be covering program building here for the next couple of weeks. And like I said, we're attacking this from the point of view of you got the job, now what? We're not attacking it from the perspective of you've had the job for a while. That could certainly be some different episodes in and of itself, is maintaining that winning culture, which Coach Kersting obviously would have tremendous insight and expertise on that. But we're going to turn it over to him now, and we're going to talk about this largely from a high school perspective. I think most of the time in this case we're going to have high school coaches tuning into this. So the question is you've gotten the job at your new program, now what?
Before you got the job. And that homework entails, why is this a good job for me? Am I a good fit? And what is it about the program that attracts me and makes it so that I'm going to have the best chance to succeed here in establishing a program from the ground up. The critical thing to me is, what do I bring to the table? When I had the opportunity for 3 different head coaching jobs at the college level. And the first one was at a junior college in Thatcher, Arizona, Eastern Arizona College. I didn't know anything about the school. I coached against them as an assistant coach. I've been to the town one time, but I really didn't have much familiarity with the school. So it's like, why am I a fit there? So it just didn't seem like it made sense for me even to really pursue it, even though they were interested in me. The second one was at Glendale Community College. Now, I had been an assistant coach at Glendale Community College. I had recruited that area. I knew many of the high school coaches. Many of the high school coaches knew me. So when that job came open, I applied for it. I didn't get it the first time I applied for it. But I knew in my heart that I'm a good fit for this job if that job ever comes open again. It's my circumstance at the time. Well, it turned out 2 years later, the athletic director was calling me and asking me to apply for the job the second time, and I got the job the second time. And I knew it was a fit. Now, the resources at the college were horrible. We had a terrible weight room. I had very little money being paid to me. I had very little money to go out and find or offer to assistant coaches. But what I had was I already had relationships in that community. So I knew I could bring in at least 3 or 4 solid coaches that could build the framework of where we're going to start with this program. So before you ever get the job, you should have a really good idea, all right? Who am I going to be able to bring in with me and get commitments from those people, ideally, and then fill the gaps with the other positions that you're going to need on the staff. When I look at a high school program, now that I've coached more on the high school level and towards the end of my coaching career, I find that maybe the most important position to hire is the head freshman football coach, because that guy is going to be the first person that meets with parents, that meets with the new athletes coming into the program. Will they have a positive experience? Will they enjoy being in the program? Will they build friendships? Because what I want is guys that stay in the program for years, for not just the first year, but for all 4 years. Now, obviously, some guys are going to fall by the wayside for various reasons, but the more positive experience we can have at that freshman level, the better chance we have of building a program from top to bottom. Now, I didn't know that when I got my first head high school coaching job. I didn't know that at all. And when I came into the head coaching position at Deer Valley High School, I was told that the freshman staff wanted to stay that had already been there. I didn't know any of those guys. I knew of one of them. So I talked with them, and they were excited, I thought, excited about staying. Long story short, they bailed out at the last minute on me, and I had to take a varsity key assistant coach and ask him to take over the freshman program. He did a great job, and we were very fortunate, but it hurt our staff for sure, because I lost a key position on the varsity. So I think, doing your homework ahead of time to see what makes sense. Part of that homework is, where's your administration at with respect to hiring football coaches? I went to our administration and said, look, if you have a teaching position come open, can you please let me know and see if I can find a coach that fits your needs as a teacher, but also could be a good fit in the football program as well. And I was able to get that at Deer Valley, and that helped me out. I was able to bring in a couple of really good people that were key to our success there, and that made a difference. The other things you need to do are, when you go into a high school program, you're typically going to have guys that will want to stay on that were on the previous coaching staff, which can be great, but also can be challenging. Where sometimes their loyalties may be with the previous staff and the previous head coach, so much so that it might undermine your program. So I think doing a good job of working within the administration and also interviewing people that are already at the school or already in the program to make sure that they have similar philosophical approaches to what you want in your football program. So I think that's real key. Any comments on that, or any questions about that? I want to get into philosophy of those things in a minute, but any questions about any of that?
Oh, all that makes sense. We talked last week extensively about making sure it was the right fit. There's certain guys that are outstanding football coaches that maybe aren't a great fit in a particular spot for whatever reason. And I think it's what you're talking about, doing your background work and examining whether this is the right fit for you is critically important. Also, you mentioned that having a lot of work done before you get the job, because we talked last week about if you're starting when you get the job, to be honest, you're already kind of starting behind a little bit. So I thought that was really, really interesting on that. Coach Prusso?
Yeah, I thought you echoed a lot of the points we hit on, which is, I guess, nice to hear that we're not out too far in the wilderness with our thoughts. But I really like what you mentioned about the freshman coach, because that is the tone setter, that is the usher, the greeter at the door. And we were so fortunate to have Coach Harrelson in that role this year. And I would joke with him many times. I was like, "You're such a great coach. You're Like you're like a perfect freshman coach, but you're too good of a coach just to stay there long term, just because his potential is extremely high. So I guess that could be a follow up question: is how do you balance that of someone who is successful and could thrive in that freshman role, but your natural inclination is always to want to move up, and you want guys to be invested and feel they have the chance to move up. So did you run into that, or did you ever have to balance that?
Well, I think another strong area to groom your coaching staff is from former players. And so I had a lot of success, especially at Glendale Community College. I wasn't at Deer Valley long enough to groom that so much. But at Glendale, we had a great deal of success having guys that had played for us. They understand the culture. They understand the expectations and the standards that you put out in the program. And so having people in those key positions is a big part of it. So yeah, if you have a freshman coach who's, say he was there for a couple of years and he has desire to move on to the next level within your program, or maybe even move on. I'm a big believer that our job is to help everybody reach their individual goals. I expect a yearly commitment from someone that's going to be in the program, whether it's an athlete or whether it's a coach. You say you want to be here. Okay, I expect you to be here for the whole season, through good times and bad, just like a marriage. And then after the season's over, we'll talk about where you want to go from there. So yeah, if you have a guy that wants to move up and he's shown, one of my philosophies with assistant coaches is you earn how much you get to do. You want to do a lot. You want to have a lot of input. Well, show me that you're going to work to get that input. Show me you're going to put the time in doing the film study and doing the off-season study and growth development that shows that this is really an important thing for you. So when you have a guy like that, yeah, you got to reward him. I want to keep good people in the program, but I'm not going to keep a guy. When I was at Glendale, I lost, I don't know, half a dozen guys that became head coaches, mostly at the high school level. Some went on and became head coaches at the college level. So yeah, you're going to lose good people eventually. And that's a good sign. It's hard when it happens. At the moment it happens, it's really tough. But I was really fortunate. In my years at Glendale, we didn't have the same coaching staff 2 years in a row, except I believe 05 and 06. And in those 2 seasons, those are my last 2 years as the head coach there, we lost 1 game in 2 seasons. But it's because we had great continuity. And in those 2 seasons, literally, I had 1 player to coach, the quarterback. I didn't have to micromanage anybody. I had great assistants at every position. I had multiple guys that could have been the offensive or defensive coordinator, or special team coordinator for that matter. So it was a delight. But I mean, that's after 16 years. So you're going to lose good people, but hopefully they're growing along with you and having success and meeting their career goals as well.
Well, I think you touched on it, Coach, there with the freshman coach, but I was also curious, before we get into the next question, if you could tell us, you said the freshman coach, what are other areas on your staff that you feel are the most critical in hiring to have a successful program?
Well, most of the time, because of limited budgets, I felt like I had to coordinate something. I didn't always, but most of the time I did. So pretty much the first half of my coaching career, I was a defensive coach, and obviously coordinated defense. And then the back half of my career was mainly an offensive coach and coordinated the offense. So if I could go into a job and say, okay, Kersting's got this, all right, and we can handle that position, right? So I'm offensive coordinator. Obviously, the other coordinator's a critical job, But the other job that's just as critical to me is the strength and conditioning coach. I didn't want to be the strength and conditioning coach as a head coach. One, because I know there's people that are better. I'm adequate. I could do it. I could do an okay job. At my age now, probably not so much. But when I was in my prime, I did. I had to be the strength and conditioning coach. But I didn't want to be, because I wanted two of us in the weight room at the same time with all the players at the same time, and I could look for things. I could look for opportunities to recognize great behavior. I could look for opportunities that showed leadership within the weight room. I could look for opportunities where if I needed to, if I got that email about such and such student athlete, it's not getting it done in the classroom or whatever, where I could sit down and be, I used to say the daddy talk, and then it became the grandpa talk, that you can do better, the do better talk, and try to put out fires before the fires ever got big. So that's the next most critical to me. So both coordinators, obviously strength and conditioning coach, and then from a bias standpoint, if you're going to throw the ball well, you better have somebody that knows the passing game. So I felt like as the offensive coordinator, I knew the passing game. If I could find an assistant coach that could coach the quarterback and just the quarterback, that would be a great thing to do, and work his fundamentals and really just focus on his fundamentals. I never had that opportunity. I don't say never, but I don't think I ever had that opportunity. On the defensive side of the ball, as much as people throw the ball now and put pressure with great athletes on the perimeter, you better be really sound in your secondary. And you better have a guy that knows the coverages, that knows how to teach it, that understands the coordination between the back end and the front end. I found that much of my career, I thought that was an area where a lot of people weren't always well prepared. You got to get 11 guys working together. And if the back end isn't coordinating well with what we're doing on the front, then we're going to give up seams. We're going to give up zones. We're going to lose a guy in man coverage and give up big plays. And the quickest way for the other team to score touchdowns is somebody on the back end screws up. And when they put 6 up on the board, we don't have an eraser for that. So we don't want to give up those plays. All right, we can give up a little bit of chunk here and there, but those big ones, they hurt you a lot. So from my standpoint, coordinators, strength coach, secondary coach are probably the key positions that I want to make sure we are really, well, let me back up. I almost missed my favorite position. The offensive line coach is the most critical. He's the most critical technique coach in your program. Those guys got to be so sound, and those guys have to work so well together. And I was so blessed in my coaching career. I always had I had a great offensive line coach, including the guy right there on the screen, Cody Collette, who was our offensive line coach when I was the coordinator for him at Prescott High. But at Glendale Community College, I had great offensive line coaches, especially technique-wise. I mean, we were so sound in technique that you rarely ever had an unblocked guy coming through anywhere. As an offensive coordinator, we want to avoid negative plays, and that all starts with the guy up front. If those guys up front are doing their job, then there's a real good chance we're going to get the pass off if they're throwing it, and we're going to get at least back to the line of scrimmage if we're blocking who we're supposed to block. And usually we're going to get a lot more than that. So coordinators, strength coach, O-line coach, secondary coach, those are the positions that I think are really critical.
I think that's really interesting too, because I think those are the ones you hear in the stands the most. The vaunted, the wonderful coaching response of block somebody, which I know all of us have heard in our coaching career, or on the flip side, cover somebody is also a popular one as well. Coach Brusso?
Yeah, we had talked about that. I don't know when recently, but those mistakes are so just evident for anyone, whether you know football or you don't know anything about football. If your DB makes a mistake, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, and same with the O line, they come sprinting through. So I like that. Those are crucial spots, and as much as the game has evolved and changed and whatnot, it's almost like those two are still just important as always, and just if you're not sound there, it's going to be really hard to win a football game.
Moving on, wanted to talk about putting in your system. Also wanted to add kind of a fun question at the end of putting in your system, but I'm going to turn it over to Coach. When you're getting the job, how do you go about putting in your offensive and defensive systems?
I think you start with what your philosophy is. And my philosophy was that special teams is the most important area of the game. Defense is the next most important area of the game, and offense is third. And then there are two prerequisites to having a system where the players are really going to be able to succeed. And the prerequisites are you teach the players, try to do exactly what you're coached to do. Convince them that we have spent years and years studying this, working at this, talking with other coaches, observing video, and learning the best way we know how to teach it. Now, I always used to tell guys, because as more often a junior college coach, you're getting guys from all different kinds of programs, and they don't used to exactly doing it the way we're going to do it. I'm not saying there aren't other ways to do it. There are other ways to do it. But this is what we understand. This is what we know. And trust us that this is the best way we know how to teach it and do it. And then the other prerequisite is give great effort. Give great effort. Do great mental effort, physical effort as a teammate. So in installing the system, with special teams being so important, in the springtime, spring is to me is probably the most critical time of the year, because in the spring is when we're establishing the standard. We're establishing the expectation that we have within the program. So with special teams, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in the spring with the system, how we're going to block punt protection, how we're going to block PAT field goal, how we're going to cover the kicks. We're going to work on the fundamentals that are part of special teams. We're going to work a lot on snapping the ball, on holding the ball, on catching the ball, on punting the ball, on fair catching a punt, on being coordinated with return men. If we're going to have two guys back on kickoff return or whatever we do, we're going to coordinate that. We're going to work on get off with kickoff coverage. And one of the drills that you and I did quite a bit, I can't remember exactly what we called it, but my brain.
I think we used to call it trap drill, where you have the guys running down and the returner goes back and forth, and they're both trying to close it with their inside leg.
So it's those kind of things that we're going to install with the idea that, okay, when we get to the season, we're going to put it all together with the kickoff team. But right now, let's get the idea of how do we time up with the kicker? How do we get the full speed as fast as we can? And how do we leverage that football in this trap drill? Keep the ball, if I'm on the right, on my left shoulder. if I'm on the left, on my right shoulder, and squeeze that return man between us. So those kind of things are what I want to teach in the spring with special teams. Defensively, we want to get in our base schemes. Okay, what are the base fronts we're going to use? What are the different D-line stunts we're going to be using? What are our base coverages that we're going to be putting in? What are going to be the formation adjustments that we're going to be putting in? All of those things I want to get established in the spring. And with most football nowadays, there's this huge emphasis on the passing game and 7-on-7 and tournaments and things like that. So in the spring, major emphasis on the offensive passing game and the defensive coverage, and the fundamentals that we're going to teach there. Now, one of the things I'm a huge believer in is try to look at every position on your defense and determine, well, how many different fundamentals does each position have to learn? So we used to typically use a weak side corner and a strong side corner, or most of the time it was a boundary corner and a field corner. Safeties, something similar, okay? Field safety, boundary safety, right? That way we weren't waiting for the formation and then we're running across at the last second trying to get lined up. So I would look at our boundary corner position, all right? What fundamentals does he need to know? Okay, he's got to be able to play man coverage. Is he good enough to play press man coverage? If he is, great. Okay, if we want to be able to have him play off man coverage as well. Okay, he's going to be a deep quarters player, a deep third player. He's going to be a funnel technique cover 2 type corner. So when we look at all that, that's 5-6 different techniques. Do we have time to coach all those techniques? Do we have enough time in practice for him to learn every one of those techniques? So I need to make a decision early on as a defensive coordinator or secondary coach, whoever's making that decision, or head coach. All right, well, what are the most critical fundamentals he's got to learn? And can we get those taught in the springtime, give him enough reps for him getting good at things? And look at your safety positions as well. Look at your linebacker positions as well, and the D-line. We were a 3-man front most of my early career. We evolved into a 4-man front towards the end of my career as a defensive coach. And then when I went to offense, our new coach came in and we became a 3-man front again. I don't care personally. I don't care if we run a 3 or 4-man front. Do what you know how to do well. So that is one of my key coaching points with assistant coaches. If I have an assistant coach that has a strength, let's use that strength. If he has a knowledge in a certain area, he knows really how to teach a certain coverage really, really well. Let's use that coverage. Okay. I used to do this with offensive line coaches often. There's certain blocking schemes they really love and they feel comfortable teaching. I tried to adjust how we ran our plays to fit how he liked to block things. So using the strength of your people, I think, is critical. Back to put it in your system. So when I look at a system, before we ever start practice, I want to determine, okay, in our defensive front, what are the maybe 3 different, maybe 4 different techniques we want these guys to be able to learn, okay? And then we practice the heck out of them in the spring, and we maybe run 2 or 3 different fronts, whatever, that they incorporated those different techniques, okay? Back end, same way, all right? Linebackers, similarly. Because I think one of the things we run into in coaching is there's so much information out there. There's so much knowledge that we can learn ourselves. But it's not how much I know. How much can I get that player to know? How well can I get him to do the different techniques that we're asking him to do. And if we overload him, we're going to have a problem. Now, when we look to the offensive side of things, and I learned this from you, Coach Collette, you came up with the idea that we're going to really install our offense 3 separate times. We're going to install it in the springtime. We're going to install it again in the summer. And then when we start our practice in August to get ready to play the season, we're installing it again. So our basic blocking schemes, and we had gap schemes, and we had isolation schemes, and we had zone schemes. Those schemes were going to be introduced 3 separate times, okay, with the different plays that fit with those schemes. Pass routes the same way. So I really grew fond of the fast screen concept that we started doing at the end of my time with you, Coach. And that concept would be reintroduced 3 separate times. And so by the time we get to August, before we start the season, the players are like, Coach, that's nothing new. Teach me something new. I want them to think this is so simple, this is so easy, that they don't have to think, that they can just go play. Okay? When guys are thinking, it slows them down, whether it's offense or defense. One of the things we used to talk about all the time is 11 full-speed football players playing defense. We want 11 full-speed guys. If they're having to think about where to line up, do I slant to the right or to the left or to the field, and we've got to get them to the point where they're just going. And the other thing that I love is practicing very, very fast. I don't love teaching fast. What do I mean by that? Players need to hear it. They need to see it. They need to feel it if you have to have them feel it, and feel it. You may literally have to move their body through a particular movement to get them to feel what it feels like. Bending of the knees, the first step, not making a false step. What does a false step feel like? Okay, all these different things. And then the fourth one is obviously do it. Well, to see it, to hear it, I like putting stuff on a board, on a videotape, on Huddle, whatever, visually. They see it. Okay, but you coach through it. And then hear it. You're teaching it to them, or maybe the video has a voice and can speak through it, right? And then the feel it, Coach Collette, you know this about me, I love walkthroughs. And a walkthrough really isn't a walkthrough. It's really run the play, but we're not in full pads, and we're typically on a hard surface like a gym floor, or maybe we're out on the field, but we're going through it at a different speed, but the technique should look exactly the same. Everybody's technique, the ball handling, the stances, the first step, the second step, the hand placements, everything should look like what it looks like on Friday night when we're trying to knock somebody off the ball and win football games. And I also believe in walkthroughs on the defensive side of the ball, especially to stop the run game, because that's when you can slow it down with your players and show them exactly how it should fit. So if we got a team that's a down scheme team, they're pin and pulling and they're trying to kick, okay, how do we defend this? All right, you can teach them exactly where you want that guy how you want him taken on the block, where the ball should force to, where the secondary guy should be in position to make the play if it does bounce outside. But just it really breaks it down so that once we get on the field, we're not doing that anymore. Once the real live practice starts, there's not a lot of this going on, what I'm doing right now. Very little of that. A lot of full speed flying around, communicating between players, and getting out the next call so that we can get as many positive reps on the field as possible. All right.
I know, Coach, I got so much out of that with you doing the walkthroughs pre-practice style. I know helped us a ton immensely. Helped me as a coach too. I don't think I did it nearly enough in the early part of my career, and I think we've been able to fine tune some of those things in moving forward and doing those walkthroughs pre-practice. And now I could hardly start a practice without doing at least a 5-10 minute walkthrough on whatever we're doing at the start. And I think that's so important. It's something that I was painfully underutilizing in the early part of my career. Coach Brusso?
I just love everything you said. You said so much, and there's so much to unpack from every little aspect in terms of scheme, teaching, players, how they receive that info and whatnot. Specifically, appreciate and enjoyed what you talked about in terms of teaching what you know and doing what you know, because there is so much out there, whether that's from resources as a coach or just other opinions or perspectives and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you really got to just stick to your guns and do what you know and do what has served you well in the past. And I've often found that people get really into the weeds with schemes sometimes, but then at the end of the day, it really only matters if your kids can do it. So when you're talking about, do we have time to teach this? Do we have time to have this kid learn it, especially, which is the most important part? Because if you're trying to run something that the player doesn't know how to do, you're ultimately going to be unsuccessful. And then being back with Coach Collette and the speed and efficiency at which we move has challenged me as a coach to make sure I maximize every minute and every second, which has been a fun exercise for me. And it really makes you sit down and think, like, what's essential and what can the players retain and learn and do well. So I appreciate all that.
I think a combination of being sound with what you do and then doing things that you know. Now, I'm not saying I'm a big tweaker. We're going to tweak this here and there, and every week we're going to have a little bit different stuff in the scheme, but don't want to reinvent the wheel from one week to the next. I remember when I was young in my career, I was a secondary coach at NAU, and I was not the coordinator, and our linebacker coach, who was also not the coordinator, we didn't have a coordinator, but our linebacker coach, from one week to the next, wanted us adjusting to trips differently from one week to the next week to the next week. I said, Coach, I don't understand it, number one, and number two, I got to get these guys to be able to play fast. And if we're thinking all the time from week to week to week, we're going to have a problem. Now, I will say that coach taught me a lot, and I learned quarters coverage from him way back when nobody was teaching quarters coverage. And we ended up breaking the NCAA record for interceptions returned for touchdowns that year because we had people in places that quarterback had no idea where they were coming from because nobody was doing it. But we were teaching some things. But literally, my entire individual periods were spent coaching that coverage. That's all we did. We played two coverages basically that year. Then we played man with no help and brought the house, or we played quarters coverage, and we had a lot of success defensively. That was a lot of fun.
That's such an interesting point because I know Coach Brusso was talking about a few years back at Casa Grande when they won the 4A state championship in 2021. They played one coverage the whole season. So, and there's certainly guys that have had a ton of success playing multiple coverage. So I'm not saying that can't be a way. I think one of the mistakes coaches do is thinking their way is the only way, and there's always multiple ways to do something. So I prefer that simplistic way, and I've been around Coach, so I know when he's talking about tweaks, he's talking about different ways. I think he does a lot of what I like to call changing the presentation, not the play, and I think he's the best at it. We did that really, really well in our years that he was with us, and I learned so much in that time. We've touched on strength conditioning a little bit, but in the effort of time, I'm going to go to our next little bullet point here, which was how do you go about when you first get the job assessing your players' abilities and trying to put them in the best position possible while also learning the strengths of your opponents. Because one of the things that's in your book that I always think about when we're kind of designing what's going on for that next season, one of the main points in there I thought was you have to build your system around what's going to beat the best teams in your league. And that was something that I hadn't thought about. And now we go into everything, spring ball, summer ball, thinking about how this equates to the best teams in the Grand Canyon region, the teams that we're going to have to beat to have a successful season. And the idea being, if you can beat those teams, the best teams in your league, then it should be good enough to beat the other teams. I'm going to let you expound upon that. That was something that I always found super, super interesting.
Stumbled into that. And my second year as a head coach at Glendale Community College, we did something I never anticipated, I never even thought about, was not on my to-do list, goals in life. We went undefeated and won a national championship. And we had won 3 games the year before. To this day, it was incredible. But it was from that season that it made me realize, if we're ever going to do this again, that's the standard. That's what we have to do. The way it was set up, we didn't have a playoff system in junior college. We had a bowl system. And to get to an elite bowl game, you had to have a tremendous record. But from our league, you better have an undefeated record and be playing against the team ranked 1, 2, or 3 in the country in the bowl game if you're going to have a chance to win the national championship. So it was from that point that I said, we got to beat the best teams, and that's got to be our plan. When we design our system, what is a system that is going to beat those teams? So we played teams that were, several teams that were much bigger and stronger than us. We got stronger and we got bigger, but what we were able to do more than our opponents is we were able to play a number of players, because I think the strength of our program became the development of players. And when I look at a football, when I look at the calendar year, I break football into spring, summer, in season, and then when I was on the college level, recruiting. So the springtime, the number one objective was build the strength of our team, build the size of our team, build the explosiveness of our team, build the speed of our team. We would literally take guys that came out of high school and put 20 to 30 pounds on them and improve their explosiveness and speed. Almost every single player on our team was able to do that. Now, you're talking about 18, 19-year-old guys. That's a huge growth time for those people. And it can be, if you do it right, it can be just tremendous. And so that was a huge part of it. Take what we have and let's, maximize what abilities they have. Now, part of that is testing. So in the springtime, we would test explosiveness with vertical jump test, long jump test, standing long jump, obviously 20 and 40-yard dash times. We did some strength testing, but not a ton of it. It makes me nervous to do too much strength testing because of injuries. But we did some strength testing to try to see where they're at about midpoint of the spring. And then we would tell them we're going to test you again in strength about sometime in the summer. And we usually do that about midpoint of the summer. Didn't want to get it too close to the season and again, risk an injury. So that kind of testing would tell us, okay, the kind of athletes we have. Now, how good of football players they are? Well, you don't know yet, but you do know what you've seen on videotape from the past performance. So if you've got, sophomores, juniors in your program, played on the freshman level, you could look at that tape if you wanted to. I wouldn't watch it too much. Right? I would just get an idea of, does this guy have Well, I remember Bobby Ross. You probably don't know that name. Bobby Ross was a head coach at Georgia Tech the last time they won a national championship. That's a long time ago, probably before both of you guys were born. But he spoke at a clinic I was at and said, is he big enough to play the position? And is he fast enough to play the position? And if he is, what's his character? Because he felt like if the guy's got the right character, we can make him into the kind of football player that we need him to be. And so I've kind of lived by that model. So I always try to give a guy a chance. The other thing I've always believed in, and this was different in junior college than it is in high school to a degree, if a guy plays well enough to win for you, he should be on the field at some point in the game, whether he's a starter or not. Now, Coach, you and I have talked, and we tried to figure out of the guys on our roster, how many guys can actually win for us, you know? In some years, it was less than 22, probably. In other years, I think we had as many as 26 or so that we felt like at Prescott High School that they could win for us. And so, and I heard Bill Belichick make this statement. I really like this. Tell me what he can do. Don't tell me what he can't do. Tell me what he can do. And then when you figure out what he can do, let's design something to let him do it and have success. Okay, so I was a college safety, and I was okay, but I ran a 4.840. You didn't want Joe Kersting locked in man coverage on great slot receivers all game long. That would not have worked out well for the NAU Lumberjacks or any other university I might have played for. But I could do certain things. I could do certain things pretty well. Let's maximize their abilities as much as possible. Now, ideally, you got guys that can do it all. Yeah, when you find those guys, they better be all state, right? They better be getting scholarship offers to play at the next level. But that's my feeling when it comes to players. One of the things I love doing, and I learned this at your hated school at the University of Arizona when I was assistant coach down there, we used to do a subjective grade after every preseason practice of our players. And the head coach would read off the name of a player, and you would have to give him a number grade of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. 1 means he has no chance to get on the field for us at this point. 2, he has a chance, but he's not ready yet. 3, he's good enough to win for us. We put him in the game against, that time, ASU. We got a good chance to win the game. 4, this guy's going to be an all-conference player, maybe even All-American. 5, he's All-American. He's NFL. He may be a first-round draft pick. Okay? Now, kind of watered that down a little bit to the junior college or high school level, but the idea is the same. We want to find as many threes as we possibly can on this football team. Okay? But by doing it the way Coach did it, he put the assistant coach on the spot. He's requiring the assistant coach to really evaluate. Don't just coach this player, evaluate this player. Determine what he needs to improve on. Is he good enough really to do those 4 or 5 techniques we said we want him to be able to do at their position? Can he do all of those? Okay. Now, the other key way of grading in that system was you had to determine, is this guy improving or is he regressing? And at the U of A, he's staying the same. When I took over that system at Glendale Community College, we didn't believe in stay the same. We either believed you're getting better or you didn't get better. And so you regressed. So a guy might be a 2 and improving. Next practice, he's a 2 and improving. The next practice, he's a 2+ and improving. Okay, so he's trending the right way. Those are the kind of guys we got to keep coaching. Even if they're not ready to play, they're not ready to start, we got to keep giving them reps. Okay, anybody that's improving, If the guy's regressing, it's time to have the daddy talk with him. It's time to sit him down and say, what's going on? Okay? Your performance is not going in the right direction. You can do better than this. And I believed in holding every single guy to the same standard. It doesn't matter what his athleticism is. What matters is he trying to do exactly what we're coaching to do? And is he giving great effort all the time? And if he is, he's going to keep improving. Okay? So by the end of the season, well, in my experience at the junior college level was freshmen rarely started at the very beginning of the season unless they were a really, really, really good player. But by the third or fourth game of the season, half of our freshmen could play for us and win for us because they just kept getting better. They just kept getting better. They just needed to be against the competition and understand the level that they have to perform at. And it was exciting. It was fun and exciting. When you talk about, I would say this is one of my weakest spots in coaching, and I think it's a really important thing. I didn't spend enough time evaluating individual players on the other team. Early in my career, like I said, I was a defensive coach, and so it's pretty easy at the college level especially to get the statistics and see, okay, this guy's averaging this many yards a game, this quarterback's completing this percentage of his passes for so many yards per completion, this wide receiver's averaging 20 yards per catch, this guy wide receiver's got a dozen catches, but he's only averaging 6 yards per catch. So you kind of just look at the stats and you got an idea who we got to stop. Okay, but I think what you used to do, Coach, and much better job than I did, is look at in the trenches and those guys in the trenches and how they matched up. Now it's funny because as a recruiter, that's where my eyes only went, was in the trenches. I was always looking for linemen because if we had a good enough linemen, we were going to be successful because we were able to find plenty of fast guys and tough guys and those guys. But if you have guys in those trenches that can control the line of scrimmage, they're the hardest guys to find. So if I was to say an area that I would, if I was coaching again and talking to my defensive or talking to my assistant coaches, I would probably require, by position, okay, I want you studying these particular position on that offense. Okay, these, the line. If you're the coaching the running backs, you're studying those two inside linebackers. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses, etc.
Great points there, Coach. Really enjoyed all of that. So valuable. Such great information there for everybody to think about. Always gives me food for thought. And I think that's still an area that I need vast improvement on is doing that. But the other thing that I think I needed to do a better job in is evaluating players from a practice to practice basis. And I think that's something that you verbalized there so well, is going about with an actual system of how you do that from practice to practice. Coach Brusso?
Yeah, I think sometimes it gets hard. Coaching is very much like driving, where you have your eyes down the road, and if you look too close in front of you, you might crash. But if you take your eyes off farther down the road, you don't know where you're going. So sometimes I think those day-to-day details can sometimes get lost because your head often goes to that big picture stuff. But I just loved how you're able to explain the abstract philosophical concept of we want to evaluate, practice to practice, because everybody probably thinks that or says that, but the system in which you explained it, I thought was very detailed and very useful and not overbearing. And, it just takes a little bit of effort. You plug that in, and I'm sure you guys reaped the results of that, more often than not. So
the thing I had to be able to do as a head coach was justify why this guy's playing and this guy's not playing. And I would track it. I would have the data right there in front of me. If a parent came in or if a player came in and wanted to know, why isn't my son playing? Well, because this is what his grades look like. Okay? If he's grading at a higher level, he'd be getting more playing time. And it was really an effective way for me to be able to justify that, and it's a great motivator for athletes. You used to do it with the offensive line coach with giving them grades, and your O line played very, very well, and always
Unless we
improved
played
throughout the season.
Snowflake.
What's that?
I said unless we played Snowflake. Those are they do such a fantastic job. But
Those guys are dudes.
yeah, no question about it. Definitely. Well, Coach, really, really appreciate you joining us. Um, Real briefly, I think if we could touch on a little bit of teaching, character, and leadership education, how you go about instituting that in your program, and we'll get on out of here for this one. But thank you so much, first of all, because that gave me. Sometimes you do things and then for whatever reason maybe you stop, but that ability to evaluate from practice to practice is definitely something I need to do a better job of with our staff. So thank you so much for reiterating that. But how do you go about teaching character and developing leadership within your program?
They go hand in hand, and I think they all started in the springtime, as I mentioned before. That's the time of year that you can really emphasize. You're not worrying about getting a team ready to win a football game that week. You're worried about the growth and development of each individual. And one of the first statements I believe in a football program, well, the first statement is football should be an academic experience, an educational experience for the players. And the second thing I believe is that we should develop the person, the student, and the athlete, all three aspects of their life that we're involved in, and that big part of that is character. We have such a opportunity as coaches because we are taking people that are choosing to come and be a part of this football program. They are typically highly motivated. It's different than having just your day-to-day student in the classroom. You got a greater potential for buy-in, if not probably buy-in from them walking in the door. So we got that opportunity. So what can we do with that opportunity? With that opportunity, I think we have an obligation to do everything we can to build them into the most successful person they can be. So, right off the bat, we talk about expectations. And what are the expectations in this weight room? And all the things you want to see. I mentioned earlier that our weight room when I first came to Glendale was horrible. It was terrible. It was the best thing ever happened to us because it required the players to be so precise in doing their workouts and changing from one station to another station. It was such a cramped space that they had to work together and they had to cooperate with each other. And certain guys had to become the leaders to make sure everything got done right. So little things like, okay, for this particular exercise, the most important thing is that you do 4 sets of 8. 4 sets of 8. So they do the first set and they do 8, and then they do the second set and do 8, and then do the third set. No, they can't quite get 8. So they did 5.5. The leader of the group should then go to that guy, hey, you need to make sure you get 8 on the next set. Well, what do you got to do? You got to change the weight. Okay, you got to lower the weight to get 8 reps. That's what you got to do. Coach said we got to get 4 sets of 8. Try to do exactly what you're coached to do. Putting the weights away. That's how you teach finish. Okay, how are we going to finish in this weight room? Okay, as soon as we say we're done lifting and we're moving to the end of class or we're moving out on the field or wherever it comes next, they should know exactly where every single weight should go. It should go there, where every bar should go, where every clamp should go, and so forth. When there are exercises where they should be spotting, I should not have to remind someone that we need a spotter for the squat. This is how we teach. We teach it to them. We break it down. We slow it down. Okay, we're meticulous about it, and we say this is the expectation. Every time somebody's under a squat bar, this is what it needs to look like. Okay, or whatever whatever you feel is important. I'm just giving examples here, but whatever things that are traits that are going to lead to their ultimate success. When I thought about this, Coach, I thought two words came to mind, or two terms came to mind. One, I want to help these guys become caring teammates, caring members of this team. I want them to care about themselves. I want them to care about the coaches. I want them to care about their teammates. I want them to care about this program, and I want them to care about the school. Okay? That's the kind of person we want in our football program. When this young man leaves this campus, what he represents me. He represents this school. Okay? And so what do we see from that young man? So we're telling them that from right off the beginning. And that's why we are exact about the expectations. The other characteristic is discipline. Okay? So I want a caring teammate who has great discipline. Okay, and the way I define discipline is doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do.
Well, as always, I get so much out of talking to you, Coach. This has just been a wonderful hour. And I know when this episode gets broadcasted, if it can affect some coaches in a positive way, and I know it will. I hope everybody gets on here and watches it, because it's been sitting under the learning tree, so to speak, for me in this hour plus 11 minutes. So I really, really appreciate you joining us, and Coach Brusso, everything that you added as well. Really hoping that this show kind of takes off and people can, if we can give back in any way to the coaching community, that's what we're doing. And that's why we're having guests on like Coach Kersting that have forgotten more football than I will know. And certainly excited about the continued progress of the show. Next week, I think we have some exciting guests lined up. I believe Chris McDonald from Basha High is going to join us, so we're excited about that. But Coach, thank you so much for joining us. And Coach Brusso, I'm going to give you the last word.
I just want to echo that and just say thank you, because I got to work with you one game as Snowflake in 22, I believe. But I was up in the booth. But I'm a little envious of Cody getting to work with you for years and years. And obviously you have great experience and knowledge, and your ability as a teacher. You just hear you obviously know what you're talking about. So I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. And I will be excited to talk to you again in the future, hopefully. And wish you guys well, but thank you for your time. It's much appreciated, and we'll be back next Wednesday, so we'll see you guys then, but thank you. Bye-bye.